Kia ora koutou. So my name is Mike. I'm from Surge. We partner with leaders to maximize your organization's potential. Tonight we have a fantastic show with us. We are looking to transition the divide between multiple locations throughout the globe. We've got UK, Australia, New Zealand, and US of A. And what we're trying to get out of today's session is really look at, is there a delta? Is there a difference between the countries? It's 20 years on since the Agile Manifesto. And we want to know, how has that grown? How has it moved on? How are we seeing different agility transformations through the ages? So so we have some wonderful guests on today. We have Jason from Australia. Say kia ora, Jason, or howdy.
Kia ora.
We have Dallas from USA.
Hi, friends.
We have Jack. We have Kolot at the top right from New Zealand. And we have Jack from the UK.
Good morning.
And remember, for those on the live session, remember to just shout out any questions you have. And if you have any questions afterwards, if you're watching this afterwards, because we do know this is going to be 8 p.m. here in New Zealand. It is 5:30, Jason?
Adalaide. 30, yes.
We have 1 a.m. for Dallas and 7 o'clock in the morning for Jack. So I feel bad for those guys. I do. We don't know which one's got it worse, but I'm excited for both of them. So we're going to rock in straight away. And I want to do a quick round the room, basically. As you see here, Sophia has come up with, curious about Jason's story with agility. He seems to feel the way I do about the power of agile, and he says it so nicely. I totally agree. Your blurb, Jason, was amazing. So what I thought we'd do a rapid, under a minute. Tell us about you. Tell us how you got into this journey, and then we'll follow up with everyone else's story. Jason, on to you.
Okay. So I started off as most people coming, I guess, through the ranks in the project world, and was a manager at one point that wanted to take his people through an agile journey. And as most managers do in the early days, they just send everybody on training and then hope for the best. And since then have experimented quite a lot. I had experimented with Scrum. And found it a really good match for how I like to work. And I think it brings people together with Scrum, looking at constant improvement and collaboration. And I just think it's really empowered me to want to get better at what I do, encourage others, look at coaching and mentoring with others, and offer them the same sorts of opportunities that Agile's offered me.
I love it, Jason. Some similarities there. Dallas, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I started off on a development team and kind of asked forgiveness rather than permission to start Agile and Scrum, and became the first Scrum Master at Whole Foods Market, and then started just kind of writing job descriptions that I thought were needed, and kind of grew up there, ended my career there as enterprise coach, and really trying to go in and not just with IT, not just with hardware, but really going into accounting, finance, supply chain, because this is something that works with everyone. And so my passion is really getting into those non-traditional roles in non-traditional industries. My 12-year-old has a Kanban board. I have drank the organic Kool-Aid. It's in every facet of my life. It's something that I'm not sure I could survive without right now. So
that's brilliant. And I love the whole child Kanban. They should start young. I totally agree. Let's go over to UK. Jack, how do we start? Where do we get to?
Where do we start? So I was 11 when the Agile Manifesto was when it came to light in 2001. So I don't know what wave we're on now, but I'm on one of them. Definitely wasn't on the first wave because I was in school, but I fell into Scrum first. left the Navy in 2015, and because I didn't know any better, went into traditional project management because that's what I was used to. And then, like a lot of people, found Scrum, realized that I'd been working in small cross-functional teams for a number of years and just didn't have the label of Scrum on it. And the way Scrum influenced people to work made sense to me because I've been doing it for a long time, although not consciously knowing about it. And then the whole world of Agile opened up to me. And that's what I've been doing ever since. It's been a steep learning curve, but I truly believe that I've found my career calling, as it is.
I love that. And like yourself, I'm quite young as well. So I was, I think I was 12 when it came out. Off to NZ. Kolar, how did we go?
Yeah, kia ora everyone. Yeah, so where did my journey start? I think, like Jack, I spent a bit of time in the services. I was an operational submariner for my sins, and like many of you, I guess, discovered a lot of these patterns that worked really well, and a lot of patterns that just didn't work so well, and was really curious from the start about why cross-functional, high-trust, collaborative environments seem to give us better results than anything else, and I just really enjoyed being in those. So journey kind of went on. I left, I was in the South African Navy at that time, went to the UK, did a computer science degree, found myself on a Jaguar production line, a Jaguar S-Type. And they had some Japanese consultants in there, and one of them took me under his wing and made me his Padawan, and he was my Jedi. And so I guess my introduction to this came through some of the ancestry for Agile as we know it today in lean practices. And I learned a lot of lessons on the ground. Since then, it sparked a passion for business design. So I would call myself a business designer by trade. I really love thinking about the purpose of an organization and then essentially engineering the organization to serve that purpose, to meet that purpose. I also believe that the practitioners I'm steering at right now, and those of you on the live stream, have a massive responsibility to, I guess, to make sure that the world doesn't suck in 20 years' time. Humanity is facing some grand challenges, and the organizational philosophy, the mental model for what it means to be an organization, I think is shifting, and it needs to kind of grow up in a way. What got us here is definitely not going to get us there. So I'm taking what's left of my career in my life and dedicating it to building beautiful businesses. And I'm very pleased to be in a partnership with Michael Law and the Surge Coach team. I also have other companies and ways that I'm supporting the startup ecosystem here in New Zealand and in our neighborhood. And yeah, just massively privileged to be on the call. So thanks for having us, Michael, and so great to hang out with all more agilistas, as we say.
Agilistas, that's brilliant. And I totally agree. Well, that's one interesting thing we probably might have time to cover today, but most of us would have started off in corporations, and yet some of the biggest agility movements I've seen have been in medium to small businesses. But maybe we get to that. But our first topic is Agile a fad? Is it nonsense? Is it going to come and go? Is it something that came in the 2000s because we needed to? We need projects. Need to be done faster. Is it faster we're trying to do? What do you think, guys? Is Agile a fad? Who wants to go first?
I think at a very simple level, doing the right thing is always the right thing, right? And I think no matter the principles, the values, whether they change. I know there's LinkedIn debate around that all the time. Should the manifesto be updated? But I think for me, it boils down to, like I said, doing the right thing is always the right thing, and trying to serve the customers and trying to be flexible. I don't think that has ever been a fad. And I think once you understand, or once one understands that once you move beyond just the values and principles and start helping people help them on the journey of being more intrinsically motivated in work, I think that leaks out to the products and services that we provide. So I don't think it's a fad.
I like that, Jack. Have we outgrown the manifesto? Is that what you're saying? Have we outgrown it now?
Personally, I don't think so. I think well, maybe, but I think they're an anchor and they're open to interpretation. I don't know. I think if we change one, how many manifestos would we end up having? We've already got a lot of guides, a lot of frameworks. I don't know. Not that it should be the one thing serves us all and one manifesto rules us all, but I don't know. I don't think the teams actually care.
I'm kind of curious about the Whole Foods journey because Dallas, you said you were the first Scrum Master in the mix, and then it's just this amazing transformation that just kept rolling forward. And I wondered how just kind of curious about your response given that history of it being a fire that just kind of couldn't be put out.
I don't think the methodology, the ideas, the feelings will ever go away. I don't think those are fads. Are we going to change the language? Absolutely. But whatever helps us, make humans more fit for work, which is what agility does, is really what we need. It's not necessarily the process behind it, but it's how do we define reality in a way that it's visible to everyone. And that was the piece. I mean, Whole Foods has really great core values, and we were able to put Agile on those core values and really do win-win scenarios. Education is a really big deal, and they hit all of those things that us as humans need to thrive, not just survive. And so when we're able to meet the part of humanity that's at work, when we're able to focus on that within a framework, I don't think that will ever go away. I mean, if we think about it, How to Influence People from 1937 is still being sold. So there's something there that we want to connect with people. We want to have those engagements. And I think Agile is the framework, the guardrails to do that. But I think it'll change for sure, just like anything.
I like that as well, because just to quote Ari from the Agile Manifesto a couple of weeks ago, he said the biggest mistake that they thought they made, in his view, was having software as the first fifth word. What has happened in Whole Foods, what's happened in IAG, what's happened in other companies, even Amazon, that was the true intention of Agile. You couldn't actually have Agile without the whole business. So that's actually really cool.
And that's when Whole Foods was acquired by Amazon. That's how we did it. That's how we put the technology in place, right? And I just want to say it on kind of a different note, just outside of professional. These are skills in everyday life. So I mentioned earlier, my son has a Kanban board. I'm getting married soon, so that will be on a Kanban board. But one of the best journeys is teaching. I volunteer at a domestic violence shelter. And I go in and it's an organizational class. But what do I teach? I teach the Agile Manifesto. I teach intrinsic motivation. And these are things, I use different language for these women, but these are the ideas that move them forward. And so we can put this in every single part of our life. And that's what I think we need to start doing. We need to start using the language pervasively throughout all of our life.
That's awesome.
I certainly see that. And like when you think of fad, that concept, it kind of reminded me a little bit about the paradox of being human. That one of the paradoxes that you deal with is that you are not a fixed thing that was born one way and will stay that way your whole life. You are a process. You're more like a process. You're not the same person today that you were than you were 10 years ago, right? You transformed by your experiences, and things have shaped you and shaped your value system. And I wonder if the Agile movement is the same, that it's not the same as it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago when the manifesto was signed, but it is the same because it's still Dallas and it's still Jason and it's still Jack, right? So I wonder if there's something about that. It's a process. It's an evolving process. It's not a thing that's static in that moment in time.
I like that. So New Zealand then, Kola, New Zealand. Is it thought of as a fad?
I think that it depends on the audience. I would say that it's managed to infiltrate most, if not all, significant organizations in some form or another. And I think in terms of like the overall sort of adoption curve, we've certainly hit the late majority part of that curve. So Agile in some form has infiltrated most environments. And to Dallas's point, we're seeing it spontaneously propagate across sectors and across domains that you wouldn't have expected to see it before. 5 or 6 years ago in Aotearoa, I had put together a program called Driving Innovation, and that was to foster more innovation activity across complex product development. And man, it was just such a privilege to be in some really diverse, complicated product environments like chemicals labs, and to introduce them to Kanban, because they were overwhelmed with all the requests and feedback they were getting, and they didn't quite know how to respond to everything at once. I was like, well, maybe you don't need to respond to everything at once. How about and so just a few patterns that seem to be bread and butter. We've learned this stuff in other environments, are still relatively fresh and new in others, So I think there's, in a lot of ways, I think we can probably draw some parallels. I know, to kind of call it out, but COVID-19 is telling us just how pandemics work. And it's not one wave that ripples around uniformly across a whole population. It's very tumultuous, right? There's wave after wave after wave. And sometimes it's increasing peaks, and hopefully for us, for the humanity, it's decreasing peaks, right? And that the infection rates are lower and the intensity of the disease is lower. But I think Agile, in the same way, is a positive virus. I would call, especially in Aotearoa, and increasing peaks. I think it's growing in intensity every time it runs through a wave. And I'm kind of staring at some experienced people around the panel. In my experience with larger organizations, they're on about a 4 to 5 year cycle of surge and recede with Agile. They'll surge ahead optimistically in blind faith and evangelism with a whole bunch of practices, and it'll deploy. And then, someone will come to their senses and go, wow, we need to kind of get some balance here and style it, and they'll dial it all back again. And then most of that work will seem like it's undone, but actually the people have had the experience. So you can never undo that. And so the recedes never quite make it all the way back. And so it prepares for another surge. So en masse, this sort of natural learn cycle, it's just this unrelenting progress, I would say. My short answer would be hell no, it's definitely not a fad. And like Dallas said, maybe some of the language might shift and change, but that's at a very cosmetic layer. The deep principles are actually generating deeper root systems in the human condition, I would say. I don't think it's too dramatic.
I like that. And what about you, Jason? Is Australia, are you similar to New Zealand? Have you seen success? That's a good way of looking at it, Carla. Are we calling it a fad now because we're receding backwards and therefore we're going to surge ahead in a few years' time? What's happening in Australia?
Well, I think if you're referring to surgence, then I would say that it's still on its way in. In terms of depending on where you are in Australia, I'd say the eastern states are perhaps a little bit further ahead. But in the centre of Australia, I think definitely on the up. A lot more interest, a lot more buy-in, and I think through the successes that we've seen potentially in the eastern states and elsewhere, a lot of senior leadership are starting to see the benefits and want to, they've got parent companies or head offices somewhere else, and they're wanting to bring that into their organization as well. So I think Agile is not a fad. I'd say Agile is actually the anti-fad.
Yeah.
And I think the words that Jack used as well as doing the right thing, I think revolving around motivating and creating energy with people, working on togetherness, and also creating safe environments for people to do what they do best. After all, we hire people based on our feeling that they are the best person to do this role right now. And so trust them to do it and let them go, is what I say. Yeah, I think that giving them the guardrails, to make sure that if your kids are jumping up and down on the bed, let them go. That's fine, right? But if they try to run out in the middle of the road, you're going to pull them back. And so, give people those sorts of guardrails, but otherwise let them go to experiment, to learn.
I like that about guardrails. I love that about guardrails. It goes into our other topic around, I guess, McAgile, right? So why don't we skip ahead to McAgile? McAgile. So for those who don't know the term McAgile, it is tongue-in-cheek. It's humorous. It's not meant to be designed for attacking, but I quite like the term. McAgile is when you take an agile transformation that worked over here and just gone, yep, I can roll it out 50 different places. So guide rails are a very reasonable thing in the Scaled Agile framework. The Spotify model has become very, very popular. Less has become very popular now. We've got Discipline Agile now, being able to overlay over the top of everything. McAgile. Jason, want to carry on your conversation about guide rails and how can you use guide rails on one organization and not adapt them for another?
Ooh, great question.
Well, absolutely. I think it definitely needs to be in context of your organization. So, what is it that what is the goal that you're trying to achieve? What is the problem that you're trying to solve? And I think that's your starting point. If you look at the pillars of agility in terms of transparency, inspection, and adaptation, right? You want to make your work visible so that you can do something about it. Once you've made it visible, then you can choose, how to apply a concept like guardrails. It's not one set fits all problems or all organizations. And I guess you don't need to constrain if there's no need to constrain.
I love that. What about specifically then around how popular is SAFe or Spotify models or frameworks in general? Are they quite popular over in Australia? Are they rolled out quite heavily?
Yeah, I think I was contemplating that when you first asked it. Actually, I was thinking about geographical location plays a big part in accessibility to learning. So, in Australia, there's, I guess, plenty or more opportunity to learn something like SAFe. Or frameworks that invest in remote training have a greater ability to penetrate the geographical location, I guess. Whereas, I guess, frameworks that require you to do face-to-face training are, in today's day and age, this year, 2020, thank you very much. That sort of training opportunity hasn't really been as accessible to people in Australia, to look at other avenues. Scrum, yes, absolutely. SAFe, yes, absolutely. Perhaps less so. See what I did there?
That's very funny.
Yeah. And yeah, I think, there's been some opportunity to explore things like Scrum at scale and start thinking about, how do we take what we currently do and apply it on a larger scale. And I guess that's one of my personal ambitions, is to try and demystify scaling, and think about it from the grassroots. What are the common principles? And I think looking at how to apply agile concepts to non-software development practices or teams is still quite the mystery for a lot of people as well. I think that's where we've got a responsibility too.
I love that.
It's not so easy, but
I'm going to flip the world on you. You ready? UK. So Australia, we've got a little bit of SAFe, we've got less, and a bit of Spotify moving on. UK, what's happening with frameworks? What's happening with frameworks, buddy?
Yeah, so SAFe has been advertised everywhere in terms of courses, which I understand. And, the market is the market, we're not in control of that. I'm yet to see an organization who is doing full safe, and I don't think that should be the ambition. It worries me. There's two things that concern me, is when organizations say they're doing safe, but they don't really understand what that means, or the leadership haven't educated themselves on what that means. The second thing that worries me or frustrates me is when, and I get it, right? Having a spammy inbox, people trying to sell you courses isn't great. But what people tend to do is they match the framework to the individual. Now, I know I'm not a trainer, but I know a lot of passionate safe trainers, scrum trainers, scrum at scale trainers, any framework, and they're brilliant people, but sometimes they get thrown under the bus because they've associated themselves with a particular framework. And then every time, say, safe is mentioned, those people get targeted, maybe not intentionally all the time, but I think we should remember that there's humans trying to do good work behind these frameworks, instead of just saying that this is bad and this is better, and you are wrong for trying to conduct training that people want. Some people need it, and who are we to say which framework is good or bad if it works in that organizational context? But to answer your question directly, yeah, safe is very popular over here.
Yeah, I love that, and I love your context around not doing a framework fully. So just very quickly on that, ones you have seen doing a framework, is it a good stepping stone, or should they avoid it completely?
So when it comes to safe, I think one of the, and I'll be totally honest, I've never done a safe course because it doesn't tickle my pickle, to be honest. It's not something I really want to get into, and I've been quite strong in that. But PI planning, for example, is it a good idea to get the group of people working on that program together in a room or virtual room to discuss work or potential upcoming work for the next 8 to 12 weeks? Is that a good idea? Yeah, probably. And a lot of organizations I've been in do that, but then they struggle when it comes to the value streams and the enterprise level. So sometimes I think it's a bit of a pick and mix. Less has some good stuff, sprint planning 1, sprint planning 2, sprint planning 1 coordinating a whole area, but at the same time, PI planning, like I said, it's not a bad shout to get everyone in the same room for 2 days either. And I think we should be okay with that and be honest about what we are doing, and more importantly, what we're not as well, and that's okay.
I love that.
I like the analogies of you're looking at the problem to solve or whatever. You can look at a framework like a library. So if you have to do a paper, you go to a library, you pick a bunch of books to be able to give you the context that you need to be able to write that piece of paper or solve that problem. And I look at frameworks the same way. It's, you can just take a bit from here and there to actually create something that's quite unique and specific to an organization so that it fits them the best.
And just to finish off, I think we forget, or as practitioners, we forget the slides that we present. So if you think about Agile is a mindset, 4 values, 12 principles manifested through an unlimited number of practices, and there's like custom column, we're giving ourselves permission to pick and mix these things. And I think we forget that sometimes.
I love that, Jack. That's pretty cool. I want to go to the US of A now, because I find US of A extremely interesting on this, because I don't use the word blame, but we have a lot of frameworks coming out of the United States of America, but we also have some really good transformations that don't use any framework. Is it that polar?
Well, I will say I did not use a framework at Whole Foods Market. It was trial and error and picking from here and doing it from here and saying, oh crap, that did not work, so we're going to do something else. And I mean, there's evangelicals in all of these, right? We have safe evangelicals, we have all of this. the thing that I see when we talk about skill, people say we're doing safe, we're doing less, we're doing scrum at scale. And so we get so far away from being, and there's a difference between being and doing, and we have to get back to being agile. And the thing is, when we go into those scaling models of safe and less, it's much more process driven than from grassroots movement. And the thing I find is when you think you need a process, you need an authentic, transparent conversation about trust and relationship. Because if you need a process and if you keep putting process in there, it's because someone has felt pain. So why don't we get to the root cause of why they feel pain instead of putting layers and layers and layers of process on it?
I love it. What about in old New Zealand, Colart?
Uh,
Obviously got a bit of a bias because
I think
I'm here.
I think that the sort of McAgile movement and the next topic, I think the people or process is very, very linked. And I think that pathways to getting agile, that the realization has dawned on people that we need to foster this thing called agility. This is a quality that we need in our organizations. We're faced with unprecedented circumstances, and it's just getting more complicated as we go. So I think there's the awareness, this growing awareness that's infiltrated all of our boards and all of our exec teams. The leadership really are aware of this. So you're hearing the words agility come in more and more on the narrative of like what it means to be as a quality that we need to foster. And then the question goes, okay, now we need to, get agile. We need to be how do we do it? So I think that question drives a lot of the patterns that we're seeing. That one of the most convenient ways is to go to your trusted partners. And there's, no shortage of our big consulting firms that have traditionally always been the safest place to go to get sound advice and to help us understand this. If you want to foster agility, then we need to make some changes. And I think that's one of the patterns I'm seeing quite frequent in our larger organizations across Aotearoa. And we're seeing a lot more sort of make it out into the news, where some big companies have made a public stance and partnered with organizations like McKinsey. And I guess the thing to me, because we're in that topic of people or process, it was never intended to be people or process. It was intended to be people and process, but we value people more. And I think there's some wisdom. I think organizations are finding their way to that wisdom, right? Like it's actually about striking the balance, and safe and disciplined agile and the Spotify model. All of these are design patterns that we've got available to us in our library now that we can bring in and go, I don't have to invent how to make a sauna. I can take a design pattern. I can go and look in my library and see which one might fit the circumstances that I'm in. And if I get the closest one and then I adapt it to the circumstances that I'm in, I actually feel like we're going to get to a good place. So just kind of really sensing into and connecting with the story. Dallas is absolutely right that half the time we're installing processes as a compensation for having to deal with the hard relationship stuff. And I think there's real wisdom in bringing humanity back to the conversation, that you end up with processes that are much more lean and wise, and people are happier and more connected. And it struck me that the organizations that become the models for others to follow didn't actually have any of them their own. So it's kind of like, it reminded me of a saying that goes, it's about agendas, law of the jungle. If you don't have an agenda, you become part of someone else's. But what if it's like, if you don't have an agile framework that you're operating against, then you might become part of someone else's.
Yeah. And I obviously I totally agree. I love strategy, guys. So for me personally, I get why our big consultancy firms go along this way. They look at agile as a product that you can roll out. So once it goes so far in the cycle, it must be commoditized. Therefore, it can be frameworked, and therefore it can be made more efficient later on. So I see why they're doing it. And obviously it's not working because you can't. Well, personally, you can't do that to a culture change. So let's move on to people and process. I think it's a nice segue. You're going into an organization, all right? Your first bet is you're going to go in there, you're going to do nothing for a month and look around, evaluate, do your current state analysis. Where do you go first? People or process? Who's going first?
People.
Easy. People.
Every time. Every
Everything?
time. Every time. People have to follow a process. People have to make the process. It starts with the people. We are humans first. We are people. We are humans. We have, cognitive biases. We have all of these things that make us tick and make us want to follow a process, want to make a process better. And so we have to understand the intrinsic motivation. We have to understand the drivers. We have to understand the culture, and we have to understand how to shift the culture so that we're going towards, self-organized teams. Intrinsic motivation. We're going towards those things that are at the heart of agility.
I love it. Jack, what about over the UK? Because I hear a lot. So obviously, I watch a lot and listen to a lot of LinkedIn. And I do see it seems to be more people orientated, but process driven to get to people. Am I right in that interpretation? How do you see it?
Yeah. So I've got 1 minute, so I'm gonna have to
that's all right.
hurry up with I can't go down too many rabbit holes, so get on with it, Jack. I think it is very much people first, but I think people have decided the process to push people towards, if that makes sense. So they start with the process and then they backtrack and then they realize it's about the people, but at the back of their mind, they're still saying, we want to set up in a squad or a tribe. So I think I think that's driven sometimes by the plans on a page, the consultancies, the agile playbooks. But I think it takes a strong individual, Scrum Master, Agile coach, Starship Enterprise coach, whatever we want to call ourselves. We need to maintain the people first principle. But like Colart said, it's people and processes, but people should always be first. And on that note, thank you very much. And then
nice,
I wish I could stay longer, but enjoy the rest of the conversation, guys.
Thanks, Jack.
Cheers, Jack. Keep the UK running. Somebody has to.
Jason, what about you? What about Australia? Are you finding any benefits going people first, process first?
I'm sorry, I missed that, Michael.
People or process? What's more?
Totally agree with everyone so far. It's definitely people first. When you look at just the concept even of who does the work, and that in itself is people, right? So unless you can start the journey by motivating people and building relationships, establishing trust, creating safe environments, being inspired by leadership, receiving empowerment so that you can be more than what you have been. It's all about people.
No, I love that. I love that. What about quick wins? So I did a thesis on transformation and how that impacts people in terms of getting a successful transformation. And what we found is that if you go to the board, then you tend to have a lower percentage chance of getting a positive transformation. And the reason why we found that out was that if you didn't support the board in their movements to quick process changes, then you didn't actually get onto the people. Do you find that over in Australia as well?
Yeah, that I guess that is true, or consistent here. You obviously need that buy-in initially, and I guess some of the consulting work that I've done, is about establishing those quick wins early so that you have the ability to continue the journey and continue to find improvement. However, how big that is can be quite different, so finding or establishing like a reference model within a particular program that's in trouble, or looking at, where the biggest risk is in the organization and resolving that problem so that you're showing those quick wins. So one school of thought, start small to show that benefit straight away and grow from there. And I guess taking more of an agile contracting type of an approach to how you deliver is really important too, because I guess if you're going in without a coaching agreement in place or something to that, often organizations will still want to, take a statement of work, deliverable based approach to those wins. And so rather than looking at a big block of time, show small improvements over short periods of time. One where you're starting to build trust with the organization, and showing those quick wins, but doing it more iteratively is definitely a good way to go. Unless, of course, you have the luxury of having a massive team behind you.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah.
Kola, New Zealand. Where's your first process? Where's your first
quick
process?
wins. I think the traditionally for me, it would be finding the early adopters. And one of the lessons I learned pretty early on was just this sort of history tells us a little bit about revolutions, right? Revolutions don't happen because people are discontent with the way things are. Revolutions happen when people experience something radically better and then are forced to go back to the mediocrity that was. and there's this sort of, this pent up frustration, like you need some tension in the system for it to want to change. And so when the opportunity comes, then that energy is released, right? Unleashed. And so very often, I think for me, the quick wins, to answer your question, would be to find the early adopters, to find the people in the organization that are so frustrated with status quo that they are actively spending time, energy, or money seeking out alternatives. And they'll try just about anything because they genuinely want the system to change. They know that there's something better. They might have experienced something at a previous workplace, or they just love the stories that they're hearing, or they might have, been on a few courses, or, they've been inspired by something. And but it's not just enough. It's not enough to be inspired. It's also the battle weariness of trying to fight the system that you're in. So I find those people and empower. We create situations that help them to wake up and realize that they've got play, that they can actually show the way to kind of better outcomes, better patterns, better things on the ground.
I love that.
Traditionally, I would use things like hackathons or innovation competitions to create more play spaces in the conversation. Very often organizations are caught up in the delivery grind, and there's too many risks, there's too much to handle. And so there's not often a lot of room for playing with other ways of working. So I think that's a way that I get quick wins, is to create a space for playing, and people tend to have fun.
I love it. So some of the biggest questions we had was on the COVID impact. As you could imagine, I'm going to rock over to I would say our most impacted country. Now Jack's gone. Dallas, how has the COVID impacted Agile mostly, but ways of working from home, just open mic? How's it been?
It's been really, really hard. It's I think it's just turned our world upside down. I think in America, we typically compartmentalize. We have our family, we have our profession, we have our philanthropies, and COVID has just kind of put them all in a bowl and shaken it. And so it's impacted the way we work, but I don't want to be completely negative. I think what it's doing is it's making us more human and be seen as more human at work. There are many times where my 12-year-old son, who hasn't gone to physical school, since March,
Wow.
comes into the room, into my office here, and asks me a question. And when people feel that, they feel like they know me, and they feel like there's more trust. So I think that is beautiful, and I think that it's highlighting the fact that we have we're multifaceted beings. We have so many things. Has it made me get really creative with my trainings and coachings? Yes. Do I miss my whiteboard and my Post-its? Yes, I want Post-its back. But it's also, I'm certified to give training from the back of the room, and if y'all are familiar with that, it is a completely in person, based on neuroscience facilitation class. And so having all of these people that are certified to coach and train, we're having to come up with different ways to do that, and the innovation, the ingenuity, and just the gumption, right? Like it's really, really empowering to see people say, you know what, we don't know how we're going to do it. We don't know how it's going to turn out, but we're going to take this step. And so it's solidifying those principles from the manifesto. And it's really beautiful. However, I would be okay when it's over very, very soon.
Yeah, so a good spinway into Catherine's question there. How has remote working changed agile organizations? So I guess the nuance of that question there is agile organizations as opposed to non-agile organizations, if there is such a thing. What would that tell us?
Yeah, I think it's really made us have to look within and be more flexible, because I for sure I have always said I prefer in-person training. I think it's better quality. I think I give better quality in-person training, but and also say, you'll get better training if it's in person. You'll get better coaching if it's in person. And that kind of has sometimes stopped the innovation of remote coaching, of remote training. And so being forced into this, I think it's making some of us that were very staunchly, in person, body language, that traditional kind of agile training, to really think outside the box and expand what we do. I think there's really, really good things coming that are going to benefit us for the next 20 years that have been made in the last 6 months. And it's going to have better access to training, better access to good training, better access to good coaching. And just like tonight, I'm talking to people from 3 different countries, and this, I'm not sure, would happen from Texas 8 months ago. And so I think it's really, really powerful. And I also want to protect kind of that in person when needed. So I think it's a balance. The pendulum has kind of swung this way. It's taught us a lot, and maybe we need to get back to the middle someday.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. I really like that.
Beautifully put. Yeah.
Jason, what about Australia? The reason I'm leaving out Colas is we've had it pretty easy over here in New Zealand. Jason,
we all know. Don't worry, we all know. We're all jealous.
It's been pretty good. It's been pretty good. We won't delve into that because it's been pretty cool for us. But what about Jason? What about Australia?
Yeah, look, I think besides the immediate sort of observation that a lot of the time we find that our days are probably getting a little longer because people feel like they need to show that they're available. And so, you get that message and all of a sudden, oh, I've got to respond to it. Otherwise, they might think that I'm not working or something like that. But really, like we've always had remote working in an agile environment. We've always had dispersed teams, and I guess we've probably been a little bit lazy, I guess, in a way, of creating like creative solutions to those particular problems. I think we took a big step towards it, but this has made us like go to a completely another level now, right? You know, we've really had to really step up the game, step up to the plate, so to speak. I think what it's done is it's reminded us what's important, and that's that human connection, and to bring that back into focus. And so what do we do? What do we need to do to be more engaging in the way that we communicate? What do we need to do to, as organizations, to accept that unless we embrace this, we won't be profitable. You know, we want to embrace a working from anywhere type of policy now, and I don't think things are going to ever go back to the way they were. Like as you say, Dallas, the pendulum swung, but I don't think it will swing all the way back the other way. I think somewhere along the line it's going to have a nicer balance for those that want to create a bit more of a I want to use the term work-life balance, but it's similar to that, and I just can't think of the right term right now. But you know, I think we want to make sure that we give people the opportunity to create the balance for them, because when they're comfortable, they're going to produce better results as well.
Wow. I don't know if it's asked enough, actually. I think it's often what I've seen is a default towards I can buy that agility, I can promote that quality in my business by buying a process. And I don't know if the question is really framed in the right way, that it would be wiser to go, what is it about the balance between people and process that might give us, that might foster more agility? And have we really fully brought our organization together as as a culture, and maybe address some of the culture questions first? You know, I got a couple of good mentors, and one of them in particular has a mantra that culture-led transformations tend to give you the best outcomes. You know, culture eats strategy for breakfast, that sort of thing. So yeah, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure I've seen the paradox handled, or the balance, the wisest decision making when it comes to approaching agility and fostering agility. Yeah.
I think if you tell someone that you're going to change the culture, that's not changing the culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think that if you have, I'm not sure if y'all have experienced this, but going to an organization and the leadership is like, we're good, but you need to work on them. They need to be agile. It's like, oh, that's cute. But
so many fingers pointing back.
exactly. Yeah, it's you know, the top down, like, of course we live in a reality that there's budgets, there's, you know, strategic plans, there's things that we have to take into consideration, but we have to take into consideration every level of the organization first, and you can't do that if it's a dictated, you know, now we're doing this. Welcome to work on Tuesday. But that conversation, and I'm not saying that the decision isn't, you know, doesn't need to be made, but bringing people in to have a conversation from all levels of the organization to make it more of a cultural shift, because right there, that's a cultural shift. right? And that's saying a lot, saying we value your opinion. We want to know what you're doing. We want to know how this can help or how this can't help. I personally like to bring in the people that are the biggest naysayers because I like a challenge. But once you change one of those, it's over. It's over. Like, they'll become your biggest cheerleader. So, yes and no for a short answer. Yeah, exactly.
Actually, through that, I just thought of more questions that I wanted to ask, actually. But I look, I think it kind of works hand in hand with that whole, is it people first or process first? I think if you've got the right right lens on that, that culture will grow. It's not going to change on day one. It doesn't necessarily need to have all of its processes organized to work out whether the culture is going to get better or not. It comes from fostering the abilities and the trust in the people who are going to be helping you get there. And only through that are you going to find cultural difference.
I think for me, there's a message to our leaders, and I use that term in the broadest sense possible. Every person that is participating in an organization is actually a leader. So it's on all of us, really. But we do have a duty to bring more compassion and humanity back to the conversation. And I think that when you do that, you create more safety. And when people feel safe, they can be creative. And when they're creative, magic can happen. Like really amazing things can happen. And so my message is out to leaders. Our businesses need to shape what happens next for humanity. And this is one of the ways, one of the small things that they can do is to change the environmental conditions for the humans that have to be in these organizations, to make them more human friendly. And we know that organizations that do that tend to show really good results. So there is a rational economic case for it, but there's also a really good hands on heart case for creating more human friendly environments.
I'm just thinking about what Colette said, and I love it. I completely agree. I mean, we are humans first. We are mothers first. We are fathers first. And if we're able to bleed some of what we do in our professional life into personal, I think sometimes it's easier to go the other way as well, and it's easier to kind of connect and make those, what you were saying, make those connections and have that authenticity that builds trust and builds, the steps to radical transparency, which is what we need in organizations in order for transformations to work. We need to care about finite capacity. We need to care about defining reality, right? Like, project plans aren't reality. We need to get down to what it is. And when we honor humans first, when we make work more fit for humans, that's where it is. Because I think traditionally we make humans more fit for work, but if we switch that and make work more fit for humans, that's where magic happens. And that's where we can really make sure that we're getting the best from people because they're at their best.
Oh, love that.
Both of you
work more fit for humans.
Sorry, Colin. Both of you have mentioned the word magic, when magic happens, and I think that's really you've obviously worked in a well-oiled machine that's adopted agility nicely and for their purpose. I think if I was to say anything to wrap up, I'd say to people, be courageous, be the voice, or say the things that nobody else will say, and be resilient.
Yeah.
It might not happen overnight, but it will happen.
Yes.
Awesome. Ka kite, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye, friends.